Welcome to the Georgia Show. You know, back in my special ops days, we used to call it the show, and we're definitely the show today. We've got attacks coming in left and right. All of our Rumble channels drop just before the show, so we find that quite interesting. But we're streaming on X, we're streaming on Gettr, we're streaming on YouTube, going around above all the blockage that's being thrown up, but that's cool. We can do that. We're here with my the guy that does all the work, Bill Quinn. Welcome, Bill. Thanks for coming in.
I am not doing all the work. The citizens of Georgia are doing the majority of this, and you will see why.
So we're gonna tell you some stories today. We're gonna draw a picture for you. We're calling it Connections, and we're gonna dig into really the past, I would say, almost decade of what's happened in Georgia. We're gonna start up in Johns Creek and come on down, but we need your support. This is a very trying time for us. I've sent out some emails. If you can support us, please donate on our support CDM. You sign up for our no ad subscriptions. It's really important. It gives us revenue we can count on. It gives you access to all of our sites with no content or with no ads. And the content is great. Our content is credible, off the charts, unique, timely, really unique. And you're just not going to get what you get on CDM and the Georgia Record anywhere else. That's just a fact. So please support that free media effort. It's literally the key. The kryptonite for the deep state is free media, and we are the freest out there. So please support us in that way. Support our social media. CDM1 on Rumble. We'll hopefully find out what's going on there. We're on YouTube, and guess I would have never thought YouTube would have saved the day, but it did today. So we're on YouTube. We need to grow that channel. If you're a YouTuber, please subscribe to us there and follow us and tell your friends, tell everybody. Put cdm.press in your daily scan. We're global news without the globalist spin, the Georgia Record, and all the other papers under the network. Bill, this is going to be a full show. Run through the table of contents here.
All right, so we are going to cover what happened yesterday at the GRA State Endorsement Convention in Canton, Georgia. The state candidate appeared. They spoke. There was the opportunity for the delegates, the members of the GRA that were in attendance, to vote on their choice if they felt that somebody deserved an endorsement. We're going to talk about that process, but we'll also show you who prevailed in each of the different races. We'll talk about some of the things that were discussed there because they have connections to other things. So we're gonna get through part of the report on the GRA convention. We're going to take a little segue into some of the statements that were made and what they might imply. Then we'll go back. We'll talk about the rest of the people that won, what happens from here on out. And then we'll get into some other strange connections that have now emerged following the endorsement received by Josh McCoon from President Trump. We're going to talk specifically about that endorsement, but we're also going to say what happened since, because it incredibly opened the door to a number of other connections being observed. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, we'll get into some of the other, at least one other candidate and their family foundation and some interesting connections that we see there as well. So it's one of those times when, again, we have to say thank you to a number of folks that came forward, reported pieces of this, and then gave us the opportunity to begin putting it together. We also have some of the candidates providing for us. We'll talk about that as we go through. So full hour today, probably going a little long. And again, as you said, we're on YouTube. If you need an alternative to YouTube, if you can hear us, I hope you can, consider X. We're on X at GA_record. And we're also, CDM Press is also up on X. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, it's streaming live.
Oh, so you can tell we've got a lot to talk about. And Todd named the show Dark Connections. My initial was Connections, but I agree with him. In this case, these are, in some cases, going to be somewhat dark connections and at least hidden connections. And one thing he didn't mention as he was opening the show is we are reporting the truth today, but one of the amazing things now is we're going to be able to build on things that Todd and the team brought out years ago that now appear to have importance in what we're going through at the moment. Do you want to kick us off with a message from our friends? Or
yeah, why don't we? we want to highlight David Cross. He's one of our, he is our resident financial advisor, and people have issues in their life. I just met with a family over the weekend who's buying a new home and change of jobs. People have divorces, they have deaths. We've dealt with that in our family recently, and that causes all kind of financial situations. So if you need someone to chat with and walk through those scenarios, go to David Cross. Please run an ad from him. Thank you.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
Back to you, Bill.
Okay. So again, we're calling this dark connections. This page just says connections at the moment. But what we're going to show you are the way things connect, and you can read more about what is happening when you see those connections. We'll start with an event that was held yesterday, the 2025 GRA, Georgia Republican Assembly State Endorsement Convention that was held in Canton. And it included the majority of the state candidates for the various positions within the Georgia GOP at the state level. There were a few that didn't attend, but many did, and the opportunity both to speak. And then the way this works is the Georgia Republican Assembly, led by Chairman Alex Johnson and with President Nathaniel Darnell, allows the delegates to actually place votes that if they reach a certain level, a supermajority, in other words, 2/3 of those that are able to vote, if they vote for a particular candidate, that candidate may then receive an endorsement from the convention. But they set the bar high specifically so that if there is an endorsement, it indicates a clear message from those being able to vote. So this was important. We've seen previous conventions held. There was a district level convention held just a few weeks ago, and a number of those receiving endorsements even at that convention then went on to win their various races. So we'll start with some good news. David Cross won over Josh McCoon by 57.7% to 42.3%. I'm sure for the folks that were backing McCoon, this was a surprise, especially given that just a day and a half earlier, McCoon had received an endorsement through True Social from President Trump. We're going to talk more about specifically that endorsement shortly. This was undoubtedly a surprise for many on the, in the McCoon ranks. And yet what it seemed to imply was the feeling of those in attendance that were able to vote, that they really liked straightforward answers, candor, the willingness to discuss the real issues that are and have been emerging in past weeks. And this was the message that came back. Cross won. Keep in mind that in order to get the endorsement, you have to get to essentially 66% plus one. So you have to have a super majority. So 57.7% is still a long way ahead of 42.3. We're going to talk about some things that were said during the speeches, and I think it'll draw some clarity around why this vote came down the way it did, and also some other things that have been discussed in the past days. So here's a picture of Josh McCoon and David Cross up on stage. They appeared together. They answered questions back and forth. And a couple of the notable ones that I wanted to make sure people heard was the feeling about the 2020 election. Now, keep in mind, Trump has consistently said that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. And many of those who have followed this, many of those who have done the analysis concur. They can see things in the vote results that simply don't make sense. And every time you seem to find something that needs more explanation, often our Secretary of State or his general counsel or counties or their election boards stand in the way of uncovering data that might provide additional information. Only recently, when Tulsi Gabbard came forward and said they had evidence that indicated that the voting machines could, in fact, be hacked and the results interfered with or changed, did this become just a polarizing now issue. And notably, it was frustrating to many that despite that, and despite the president's executive order stating that he wanted the states to move to hand-marked paper ballots, hand counting, and single-day voting. Fortunately, bizarrely so, Georgia did not enact any of those. They seemed to shy away from doing that. And we had heard, and many have heard earlier in the year, that in fact the governor didn't want any election integrity, any serious election integrity legislation to reach the desk. And if it did, he was going to have retribution perhaps against the lawmakers that brought that forward. So Milton Moore and Charlie Byrd and a couple others tried to push, yet everybody seemed to be standing in the way. So we'll come back to that. Mallory Staples opened the day with a speech about all the concerns around our current legislature and how many of them, even though they may call themselves Republicans, did not and don't seem to be acting as Republicans as we go through this. Let me highlight one particular question regarding what I just talked about. It was the 2020 election rigged and stolen?
Oh no, sorry. All right, do you believe that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen?
Yes. Yes. There is no question in my mind that fraudulent activities by the Democrats changed the outcome of the 2020 election. There's no, I mean, you look at them loading voting equipment in vans and driving around, finding people to vote. The absentee ballot issue alone, you know, we got the law change that you have to put a wet signature on a piece of paper to request an absentee ballot now. 374,000 people that allegedly voted absentee in 2020 disappeared from the 2024 election. So of course they cheated. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so if you listen very closely to what McCoon said, he was very careful to say the Democrats cheated. He did not get into machines. He did not get into, is this broader than just one party? He didn't get into any of that. Trump has said consistently, this was rigged and stolen. And in another presentation just a couple of weeks ago, Josh McCoon talked about spending time with President Trump. He relayed, if I get this right, he said he was invited for about a 15-minute meeting that ended up lasting about an hour and a half. And knowing the position of Georgia and the concerns that have been here since 2020, you would think that the notion of what happened and the president's judgment on it and any evidence that he had acquired would have been brought up in that conversation. You would have thought that the answer would have been much more direct. You saw David Cross stand up and simply say, yes. Yes, it was. And most of the analysts here in Georgia would concur immediately. The couching around the answer was telling for me. We'll explore that a little bit more as we go forward, but note that, you know, one of the differences that the convention saw was when Cross was asked a question, the answer was direct and clear for folks very quickly. And in many cases, McCoon would spend minutes trying to put enough information or enough language around it so that it might, in some ways, be thought of in one direction. And some in the audience said, well, I'm not sure I really understood that exactly. So we'll move on for just a second. Let me go back to the pictures. And You're going to see this in the next video, and that is, again, Josh McCoon makes some statements, and David begins to clarify them in the middle of the discussion. And this is a great example of what people called out. They said, David's trying to be direct about this stuff, and McCoon seems to be tailoring the language in a very careful way. So let's listen to this. There's two questions here. One is about John Burns and his conduct, his order, if you will, to keep Senator Colton Moore from entering the House chamber and the resulting assault, if you will, perhaps battery, alleged assault, alleged battery against Colton Moore that ended up with him to the floor, and then the resulting, case and so forth, and what we've learned since about a general counsel for John Burns not even being an attorney in Georgia, and so forth. The second part of this question revolves around the infamous 9-page NDA. So let's play this, and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
All right, now go to the question and answer. So one very, very straightforward question. As chairman, would you support the expulsion of John Burns for the Georgia GOP?
So we, for the first time ever during my first term as chairman, expelled Jeff Duncan from the Georgia Republican Party. And we did that because there was a clear, unimpeachable with Jeff Duncan of campaigning against Republicans. He refused to vote for Herschel Walker in 2022 and went on international television to brag about it. He endorsed Joe Biden in 2024. Then he endorsed Kamala Harris in 2024. Then he went on a stage with Kamala Harris in 2024 to campaign for her in Atlanta, Georgia. So if he was to ever show up again, we would say, you're not a Republican. In fact, we've even got the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that kept referring to him as a Republican. We instructed them to stop calling him a Republican, and they've stopped doing it. When it comes to current office holders, including Speaker Burns, we will have a convention in about a month. There will be an opportunity for the convention to weigh in, whether it's John Burns, whether it's Brad Raffensperger. But I want to give a very specific answer to what I think maybe the question is referring to, because I don't want anybody leaving here saying, well, I didn't get a straight answer on this. If we're talking about somebody being able to get ballot access as a Republican and be on our primary ballot, let me be very clear about this. The statute on presidential qualifying gives full control to the state executive committee. We can decide who's going to be a candidate for president. For every other candidate, Georgia law, if they present their paperwork, they pay their qualifying fee, and they sign the loyalty oath, then you have to qualify him. Now with Jeff Duncan, I'm pretty confident that we could have him prosecuted for false swearing if he signed a loyalty oath to the Georgia Republican Party. But when we're talking about a lot of these other people, what we're talking about is a lot of litigation. Some of you have reached out to me to talk about Rule 44 out in Texas and what they're doing out there to try to restrict ballot access. One big difference between Texas is there are two West Texas oil billionaires.
Point of information, is there a time limit on these?
If you want me to stop answering the question, I'll be glad to. I was trying to make sure I was being clear.
Please finish the answer, and then we'll keep a consistent time for the next one.
So as a practical matter, it would be very difficult for us to restrict candidates to have ballot access because we would either need to get the law changed or we would have to engage in litigation to have it turned.
All right. Thank you. David Cross, same question.
Can you believe this guy? It took 3 minutes. All right. What John Burns did, absolutely wrong. All right. Do I get to decide if he's tossed out? That's up to the delegates at the state convention. But I will tell you this: if John Burns is pushed out, he's going to run as a Democrat. So just be aware that it's not as simple as.
Did the mic die? There we go. All right.
want to
because
pause
there
there
was
for,
a clear, unimpeachable record.
I want to pause there for just a second. So notice that the two answers. One was, gosh, it's going to be awful tough to go after Burns because of litigation, as opposed to this is what was right, this is what was wrong, and I have to face. That's where David went. Now the other thing is, if you look, he didn't talk about what was done to Senator Colton Moore and the response that the GA GOP has had or has not had in light of that. So lots of issues here. Now we're going to get in next to a question regarding the NDA, and again, you're going to see an answer that seems to imply certain things, but then David ends up clarifying it so that people can really understand what happened here. I may have to reset the video, so bear with me for just a second. Let's make sure we get to the right place.
John Burns did, absolutely wrong, right? Do I get to decide if he's tossed out? That's up to the delegates at the state convention. But I will tell you this, if John Burns is pushed out, he's going to run as a Democrat. So just be aware that it's not as simple as...
And isn't it interesting that his mic went dead right then?
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
Good
And then
enough.
he was done speaking.
All right. Next question. And I'm rewording. I do need to reword some questions to make them generally applicable. Yes. Yes. Do you keep a 1 minute timer and hold up the cards for 1 minute? So the question is, do you believe that a non-disclosure agreement should include a non-disparagement clause to get access to the delegate list for the party? If so, or if not, why or why not? Go ahead.
No, I do not think there should be a non-disparagement clause on there because it stops free speech. And number two, it's $25,000 per infraction, and I don't know who determines what the infraction is. And then whoever wrote this document had the idiocy to put down that we're going to solve our grievances in Fulton County Court, where we know that that Republicans are not treated fairly. So it's an idiotic document.
Thank you, Josh.
So my opponent signed that 9-page NDA, but he amended it in several different ways. Did not bring attention to the fact that it had been amended.
Tell them how.
I believe it's my time right now.
Please, one at a time.
So,
Full truth.
he amended it in several material ways. As a lawyer, if I did that, I would receive a bar complaint. But let me say this: the NDA it's unfortunate that an NDA is necessary. You ought to just be able to have a handshake and say, you can trust me with this confidential data. I won't abuse it. I won't use it except for the purpose of reaching out to delegates during the campaign. And, I'm trying to finish my answer, please. And instead of doing that, we have seen these NDAs in the last 2 years repeatedly used for commercial purposes, used after the election, and it is compromising the data, the personal information that people have given to us to safeguard.
I want to pause right there. What did he just say? He said that the NDAs had been violated for the purpose of using them for commercial information or commercial promotion. We're going to come back to that in just a moment.
So the Georgia Republican Party would be liable for that data getting out. So yes, there is an NDA and it needs to be enforceable.
Answer the question.
So one of the other videos that we're going to post following the show is the further explanation of the changes. David Cross stated that he had made in the agreement. He changed 25,000 to some much less number years to 0.3 years. and send it back because it is an onerous agreement and should not have been written the way that it was. But he explained, and what he was asking Josh as Josh began to answer the question is tell him how he changed them so that it's clear. One of the things that is fascinating about this is he talked about the notion of somehow this agreement or these agreements being misused. Well, in some cases, maybe they were, and we're going to explore that right now. So let me preface this by saying I am a state delegate in the state of Georgia for the GOP state convention coming up. I know a number of folks that are state delegates, and in the last few days, I received. Bear with me for a moment. There we go. I received this email. This email is an interview between Brant Frost and Sally Grubbs. I've actually received several of these on different topics. They are coming from Brant Frost, and he promotes this as a interview to demonstrate Sally Grubbs in her background and so forth. You'll notice that it addresses the fact as we prepare. Let me make sure I get the language here right. So it reads, as we gear up for the Georgia GOP state convention. So Brant Frost is not a candidate for any current GOP office, but he sends this out. It begins with an interview of Sally, but look at the bottom of the same email. It's from a company called First Liberty, and it discusses First Liberty's offers in terms of returns for customers, flexible 12-month terms. They're a finance company, and you can invest with them and apparently earn a return. Well, kind of interesting. Who is First Liberty? First Liberty is the family. In this case, their very own website lists recommendations by, I guess, past customers or friends or somebody saying, I have known Brant Frost and his family for over 25 years. And they go on to talk about why they're recommending that you consider investing with these people. That to me is a commercial offer. Brant Frost, again, this gentleman is not a GOP candidate, but he's sending it out to GOP convention delegates. How do I know that? Well, I don't know that that's the only people he's sending it to, but I can confirm that I, as a delegate, received it. I did not give Brant Frost my email address. I have identified other state delegates that have received this email. They did not give Brant Frost their email address. How did he get it? We don't know. We don't know. Is he using some other list? Interesting to find out. But given the fact that Josh McCoon is complaining about commercial use of state delegate lists, here we have an email sent out indicating that as we prepare for the Georgia GOP state convention, do we see the problem? This appears to be coming from the state delegate list and somehow is being exploited or used by this person for, in this case, at least partially, commercial use. How did he get it? It'd be very interesting to find out.
Good question.
It is a good question. So, all right. More to come on that. I'm willing to commit. Let's talk about the rest of the GRA endorsement convention yesterday. So, as folks came in, there was a decided feeling of interest given everything that's been disclosed regarding expenses from the GOP, regarding conduct of the GOP, and so forth, regarding the NDA we just got through describing. And so you could tell people were pretty crystallized on their thinking. And so what happened? Well, for treasurer, Lori McLean, the current treasurer, who has come out and said, She does not have access to the bank accounts. She does not have access to the credit card statements. She is given certain things to review and approve that are apparently in summary. She looks at the net of the FEC filings, I guess once a month. But much of what is going on is not within her view. That is apparently contrary to the Georgia GOP rules. And Amy Kremer read the rules during a previous event just a couple of weeks ago. David reiterated some of those at this event. And she has come out and said, you know, as an example, she mentioned, I've been a member of the Gwinnett GOP for some years. I've carried around a credit card for the Gwinnett GOP. I've never mistakenly used it for personal expenses. And she ends that quote with, just saying. And so we give her a lot of credit for being willing to stand and point out the discrepancies between what we have seen and what should be going on. And she won. She won by 69.2% to 22.8% in the treasurer's endorsement race. So we give her a lot of credit for that. Next, Lisa Pierce. Lisa Pierce, who posts almost every day, not a political note, but often around to do with the life on her farm and her animals and how good the life is out there and so forth. Just fascinating. Occasionally we'll make a statement about politics, but politics is clearly not the top thing in her mind most of the time. And she won by 61 to 39%. Now, she didn't get the endorsement only because she didn't reach 66% plus one. So, but given the fact up against Sally Grubbs, again, Sally Grubbs was in that email that we saw that had come from Brett Frost recently. Lisa Pierce won 61% to 39%. Noreen Cantor, she won. It took 3 rounds of votes because they had a number of folks going for second vice chair. And so over the course of 3 rounds of votes, the delegates settled down and ended up confirming Noreen Cantor for a nomination. Again, you have to reach 66% plus one vote. In this case, you needed to get past, and I don't see the number on that I made a note here, but basically 72 votes was sufficient to get her endorsement. And so Noreen is moving on with that in her pocket. Here's a picture of David Cross and Noreen on the floor at the GRA convention, just sharing some encouragement for her. And it was very interesting. She was one of the presenters at the 3rd district, and one of her competitors took the step of, while Noreen was speaking, she kind of held her finger up and gave this kind of signal when Noreen spoke about being a graduate of a leadership conference, and one of her competitors did this. Not sure what that means, but it doesn't seem supportive. Kylie Kramer as well. It took a couple of rounds of voting to get it done, but ultimately she did reach that supermajority and did in fact earn her endorsement from the GRA convention. So net, it was an amazing day. There were a couple other things. I don't have pictures of all of these, but we will note them. The assistant treasurer, Jenny Ekman, did not have an opponent, and so there was no endorsement there. For secretary, Cindyella Nixon and Susie Voiles kind of split the vote, and there was not an endorsement, but Cindyella Nixon came out on top. And then for the over 80 chair, James Dvorak did earn the endorsement over Mike Welch. And for under 80 chair, Joanna Hildreth earned her endorsement over Kathy Hurley. So those are some of the points. Now, what haven't we talked about yet? Well, who was missing at the GRA endorsement convention? There were some notable absences. Now, there were 9 absentee ballots that were received. They were sealed envelopes, apparently without a return address, so that even Alex Johnson would not know from whom they had been delivered. But through the course of the convention, a vote was taken whether to even accept these absentee ballots, and the vote was to not accept them. So who are they from? We don't know. We don't know. But one of the notable things is in most of these conventions, especially when they've been in near Atlanta or anywhere in the vicinity, we almost always see one or more members of the Frost family. And a number of people came to me and said, "Did you notice that none of the Frosts are here today?" And I said, "No, I didn't notice that," and looked around, and they seemed to be correct. So fascinating. They noted that, and apparently they weren't there. So for whatever reason, one of the key things that really crystallized the audience was a statement that David made later in his presentation, where he said, we need to doge the Georgia GOP, and got just a great response, which has happened at the other events that he's spoken at as well. So we expect that we might see that in the not distant future. Who knows? We think it's probably well called for. Let's see, we're at 37. Let's go ahead. Let's take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about some of the resolutions that were passed. Is that okay?
Yeah, I want to talk about just here directly the wellness company, and pull your slide off there.
There you go.
So go to twc.health/CDM, use promo code CDM, and play around on the website. Wellness Company is one of our biggest supporters. Their products are fantastic. We've talked a lot about their emergency medical kits. This is the travel kit. If anything is coming as far as another pandemic or a war or whatever, you will have the drugs you need in your house to treat most illnesses. In addition, they are doing a lot of other spectacular things like weight loss. They have an alternative that's much healthier than the Ozempic, about parasite cleanses, subscriptions where you can get free prescription drugs, all kind of different innovative strategies to re-engineer healthcare, which we all know is corrupt and needs to be re-engineered. You can get wellness visits or doctor visits online. You can get pharmaceuticals, supplements, nutraceuticals. All of this is there. So check it out, twc.health/CDM, promo code CDM. They also have the Spike detox formulas. If you know somebody, a loved one that's been vaccinated, you can help clear their blood of the spike proteins and the dangers that can cause long term to health of someone you love. So please check that out. Back to you, Bill.
Okay, let's talk about some of the resolutions that were passed at the endorsement convention as well. This one regards John Burns and essentially says that their recommendation, their resolution, is to not qualify him going forward as a to run for elected office as a Republican. This was passed. This was the feeling of that convention. So you can see that the convention, the delegates at the convention, have a very direct feeling about what should not be done regarding John Burns and his conduct regarding Senator Colton Moore. One of the other resolutions was a commendation to Senator Colton Moore. And that's this. And so there's a number of things that he's done. We've reported extensively on things that he's brought forward that unfortunately have not been acted on by the rest of the legislature. One of the most poignant ones, I believe, is displaying that we had human trafficking coming through Hartsfield Airport, and yet nobody in the legislature would be willing to do anything about it. So they just left it sit there, and now we're taking bows as ICE begins to, at the president's direction, begins to take action in Georgia. One of the other things, and this is going to be something we're going to come back to in just a few minutes, was they took a resolution that prohibits Brad Raffensperger from association with the Republican Party. Why? Because of all the times that Raffensperger has stood in the way of uncovering, gathering, and delivering information that would help clarify what did and didn't happen during the 2020 election and since. Myriad examples, but clearly the delegation felt that Brad Raffensperger was not would not and should not be honored with being associated with the party going forward. So important, and relates back to, they want people to make a stand. And they saw that with Cross, and they saw lots of language written around some of the answers from McCune. All right. Let's talk about what happened outside the GRA convention in the days just preceding it, and is even going out to some extent. So my belief is sometimes future proves something you've seen in the past. Good to see you back, Todd. I guess
it's sporty today, my friend.
I know we're getting the attacks continue. Let's not play games with it. So let me begin here. On Thursday of this past week, an endorsement was distributed by Donald Trump regarding Josh McCune. And at first, all the people on McCune's team and so forth, oh boy, wow, this is important. We finally got the endorsement from President Trump. Read it carefully. McCune has my complete and total endorsement for re-election as chairman of the George Republican Party. A typo? Maybe. But isn't it interesting what's happened since? People have seen through the trappings that McCune has put up. And the following day, on Friday, this text was seen by hundreds, maybe thousands across Georgia. Certainly the delegates, again, because I touched base with several delegates and they had all received this. So again, how is this text targeted? Somebody gave Landmark Communications the list. How do we know Landmark Communications? Well, because when you press stop, when you type stop and send it back, it says you have successfully been unsubscribed from Landmark Communications. Landmark Communications rings a bell, doesn't it? And it has come up in the past. And I'm going to flip it now. If you're okay, I'm going to flip it to you, Todd, because most of this writing, most of these articles were done by you and the team going back now several years. And we're going to tie these into what's going on now. So if you're okay, I'll flip this to you.
Yeah, and we're just going to tell us some facts here. We're not going to make any allegations. We're just going to tell some facts, and they're unavoidable facts. So take that down for me, Bill.
Yep.
So I'm going to tell you a story. So back in 2020, maybe 2020, 2021 timeframe, I received a call from a woman. We had already started building CDM in multiple ways, and she said, "I have a website in North Atlanta, and it's called the Johns Creek Post, and we, post a lot of really interesting investigative work that we've done, and we found a lot of really weird and threatening stuff going on in that jurisdiction." So she tells me a story about how she, as a journalist investigating a lot of this, were threatened by the Chinese Communist Party. And how does she know it was by the Chinese Communist Party? And if you go to CDM and you type in, I guess, Tiananmen Square, you can find this article, China Threatened Journalists in North Atlanta during 2016 election. She tells me a story, and then she provides receipts of the threats. And at the same time, she tells me that Chinese people are following her and her children, videotaping her children, and she feels extremely threatened. She reported it to the FBI. The FBI came to her house, and they found the threat was coming from none other than China and Tiananmen Square. So this is extremely important to understand. So let's talk about some more facts. Let me go to another page, to the article that Bill's talking about. If I can find it here. There it is. So she also gave us more information about what had been happening in Johns Creek, and that a lot of the races, and particularly some of the alleged nonpartisan races were being run, typically it's not Republican, Democrat, but it's conservative versus whatever viewpoint of the person is. She said a lot of these races are allegedly conservative candidates, but they're not conservative. We found all this information about these candidates. And she goes on to tell me, let me find that specific thing. She goes on to tell me that, for instance, and by the way, we talk about who is Landmark Communications, but we'll go into that. One of the candidates that was running in Johns Creek was Nazira Dawood. And she's running as a conservative, as a fiscal Republican with Republican family values. And then the source starts telling me about her events. One of them was called Tacos, Beers, and Abortions. So that is obviously not a Republican family value. And then on multiple other events with these types of groups. And the company behind this, Bill mentioned, who was advising this candidate, was Landmark Communications. We go on. Other connections to Landmark Communications. Jordan Fuchs, who was the Deputy Secretary of State in Georgia, who audio taped President Trump and then tried to get rid of the file. That's documented, and it was later found by an investigator on her computer, which they tried to harm President Trump in his first term. So there's that connection. Brad Raffensperger was also represented by Landmark during his elections in Johns Creek. So the person and she told me a lot of other information, the source I have on what had been happening in Johns Creek. There's another gentleman who was groomed by Raffensperger to take over the seat on the council in Johns Creek. And that person, was a lot of other information in this article, was a man named Jay Lin, who was from Hong Kong, has obviously Asian, Chinese connections in many ways. But excuse me, I think he was from Taiwan. But anyway, and this is a picture of Raffensperger with this man who is a friend of Jay Lin, and his nickname is Old Money because he was the guy who got the money from the Chinese for a lot of these candidates. So this is an interesting connection, and it talks about that the Jay Lin's campaign and Raffensperger all were connected to this community with Yale Zhao, otherwise known as Old Money. You go on, and guess what? There is an article of one of the children of Old Money at Harvard. And this article talks about and says, talking to one of the people in the article, talking to the child of Old Money, saying, you know what, if your mom would have stayed in China, she would have been very high in the Chinese Communist Party and the central government, meaning she was highly connected. So all of these connections with what's going on in Georgia are very interesting, and you need to consider them. You can find this article on the Georgia Record if you just search for Landmark Communications. But all of these connections are real. They're factual. We didn't make anything up. We're not drawing conclusions, but you need to know these connections. And we're talking about connections, Bill, and I find this very interesting. I received a call right after this article came out from Marcy McCarthy, who said, Landmark's a big help to the GOP. I did speak with the leader of the company, and we put out an article with his comments, again, refuting some of the points in the article. You can find that on the Georgia Record too. It's still there, but the connections are there. Bill, back to you.
Okay, so it's interesting that you brought up the subsequent interviews. One of the places that your reporting got picked up was, in fact, the Gateway Pundit, and they reflected and quoted the Georgia Record right here about the support that certain candidates were getting through Landmark Communications and others, and picked that up and ran with it. And then here, I believe, are the articles that you're referring to, a discussion with Mark Roundtree of Landmark Communications, and then a second article on a connection to BLM. I know this feels like this is out of 45 degrees off of center, but we're going to bring it back. Makes more sense as we go forward over the next few minutes. So one of the other people connected directly to Landmark Communications is Gabriel Sterling. Gabriel Sterling, you may remember, was identified and was given the role of implementation manager for the Dominion voting systems when they were put in Georgia. Notably, he's got a couple different LinkedIn identities now, LinkedIn pages, one of which still easily identifies him with Landmark Communications. The other one is actually listed pretty far down in a list of 34 different previous pursuits. And so I'm not sure we can draw any conclusion there, but indeed he is connected to Landmark Communications. Here is a picture of Jay Lynn at one of Brian Kemp's announcements. I don't know if this was a signing. I don't know if you have background on this particular picture, Todd, but clearly.
Yeah, that's when Jay Lynn was in the administration of Kemp. I'm not sure if he's still there. I haven't looked at this recently, but he was assigned to, I believe, an organization that has some involvement with the Savannah port.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Thank you. So, you can see that these are important things to understand. These are important connections. As we went through currently Landmark's website, we now find this. Landmark and Rosetta Stone. And they talk about some polls that have jointly been done for the presidential election. And I believe they list a few others as well. So all of a sudden now we come in with another connection to Rosetta Stone. Where have we heard the Rosetta Stone name before? Well, it goes back to the article that we wrote, I believe about a year and a half ago, asking the question, what is the bizarre connection between karaoke and the Georgia GOP? And we identified the connection between the president of Rosetta Stone, the leader of Rosetta Stone, John Garst, and Josh McCoon. So that we talked about. We're not going to go through all the detail there, but just as we got through saying a minute ago, go look up karaoke on the Georgia Record. You'll be able to read the entire article and see the things that we initially discovered. And it led to a second article that tied then Rosetta Stone into the Georgia GOP. And just under $1 million that had been transferred to Rosetta Stone in 2020 from the Georgia GOP. Here's John Garst's page on LinkedIn, so you can see that he is indeed president of Rosetta Stone Communications. Fast forward about a year and a half. All of a sudden, last year at the Georgia GOP state convention, where delegates are being picked to go to the Republican National Convention, John Garst's name shows up as number 4 on a list of recommended at-large delegates in what was called during the convention the Trump slate. Now, this is as it was read out by Rufus Montgomery, who is the head of the nomination committee. And so very quickly, people that understand who Rosetta Stone is, the fact that John Garst was a former Dominion Systems lobbyist during 2020 and up to, I believe, 2022, wondered how in the heck to get on the Trump slate when Trump continues, and to this day has continued, to say that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. How is it possible this gentleman ended up on this list? Well, the nomination committee, led by Rufus Montgomery, I assume assigned by Josh McCoon, put him there. And we ended up having to ask that Tiffany Savage replace him in this list, and he ended up removing himself from candidacy for the RNC. Then what happened? Well, somehow he still ends up at the RNC, and here he is riding on a boat trip with none other than Mr. Josh McCoon. This is the picture we just drew for you. All these people, all these organizations are connected in odd ways. What does it mean? We're not saying anything's, illegal. We're not saying anything's, we're not drawing conclusions. But it does beg the question, how is it that all these connections are in place? Landmark Communications, Raffensperger, Kemp, Jordan Fuke, Gabe Sterling, the Fulton County GOP, Eagles Club, Karaoke, John Garth, all connected in various ways to McCune. We don't know what the end story is going to be here. We will continue to research it, but we do think it's reasonable to draw the picture for you so that you can see it and understand the roles here. The next question people should be asking is, okay, well, great. If there's a relationship between Rosetta Stone and the Georgia GOP, what's it look like? Well, this is what it looked like. Since 2017, Rosetta Stone, as a payee for all various organizations, has earned, according to Transparency USA, about $6.1 million. And this is what they can see. This is what would have to be reported. There may be other things that aren't reported. If we zoom into that, we can see that the Georgia Republican Party, Inc. Is listed in two different places for a little over $500,000 for a total of $2.827 million, or 45.8% of the total shown above on this particular report from Transparency USA. That's a big percentage of what was earned as a payee. What was it being paid for? We don't know. But we think it's probably a reasonable question. We would love to have Josh McCune or John or others that have individual knowledge of this come forward. We'll bring them on the show. We'd love to hear from them so that they can describe more about how this came to be. But these are, we believe, important questions to bring forward. Okay, last session. Before we get into this, do you want to do one more break?
Yeah, let me just do a quick highlight of, let me bring this up 1 second, of my book Currency. This is, we look at, we are the tortoise, right? I mean, when your guiding principle is just to try to find the truth and get it out there, you don't have to be fancy, changing narratives all this time. You can just drive down that path and you'll get to the right point in the end, and people will attack you, but you're just staying on the path. And that's kind of what we've done. I wrote a book that started all this some time back called Currency, which goes into all of this at a macro level. And it was extremely prescient and timely, and it still is extremely. It was just re-released by History of Books. And if you have somebody who's kind of that person that has everything, this is an interesting novel. It's faction or historical fiction, as we call it. But a lot of it is true as to the past and to what is happening today. One comment we get from readers is that feeling of just not wanting to stop reading. I stayed up all night to read it. It should be a movie. But you can find it on historyofbooks.com or go to my website, ltoddwood.com. You can get a copy. I'll sign it for you. But this is the first in a series of thrillers of the Connor Murray series. And there's over 500 reviews on Amazon. It's above 4 out of 5. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's gotten fantastic reviews. The whole series has. So if you like historical fiction, I get told I love the book, but I felt like I had a degree in finance and geopolitics after I read it. So that was the goal. So we're trying to bring truth. It started a while ago. This is what started it, and we're continuing here with CDM and the Georgia Record. Back to you, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Todd. All right, so in order for this next section, this will be another, I'll call it 5-7 minutes, and we're going to ask for your indulgence so that I can make sure you understand how this came to be. One of the feelings that you get, both in the discussions that I had with the delegates at the GRA convention, but also with folks that are advocates and very frankly patriots all across the last months, has been this feeling of there's an agenda running. There's some connections that are there but unseen. Why do people act certain ways? We illustrated some of that earlier in the broadcast. We just showed you some of the odd connections, but there does seem to be sort of things going on that maybe are there but may not easily be seen. So we started looking into the various candidates involved in the GOP races. One of those is Betsy Kramer. And Steve and Betsy Kramer have a family foundation, which is great. We think that's a wonderful thing. Foundations can contribute money to various causes. In this case, they have a list of some of those causes, and they talk about contributing to children's causes and local Jewish causes in the, I believe they say the North Atlanta communities, but that. And they have some that go back to Danbury, Connecticut. Further down on the page were a couple that we found that we thought, this seems interesting, perhaps odd. Doctors Without Borders. And there's a couple others listed here. They're international causes. And again, we generally think those are, hopefully they're good. We looked into Doctors Without Borders, and they offer in detail a number of different services. One of those is safe abortion. Now, we're not here to say that this is in some way illegal or anything else. We don't know that. But keep in mind that folks in the Republican Party are for a number of different things. One of those is right to life. One of those is, the free and fair elections and so forth. But certainly one is right to life. So we found this without really any effort. It was we came up nearly immediately when we looked at Doctors Without Borders, and we wonder if there may be other connections that should be uncovered as we go deeper into this. We don't know that yet, but we wanted to bring this forward. It also caused us to look a little bit more carefully at the structure of the Kramer Family Foundation. And when we did that, we found this. There's a list of the board of directors of the Stephen M. and Betsy S. Kramer Family Foundation. Keep in mind, Betsy's running for, I believe it's second vice chair. And down there on the bottom, we found this. Travis Bowden. Now, who is Travis Bowden? We've reported on him before. He was the subject of one of the expenses that we talked about last week. I think he called it a Christmas bonus, although McCoon in another setting called it a one-time severance payment. And he sits on the board of the Stephen M. and Betsy S. Kramer Foundation. He also is now special advisor to Josh McCoon, previously the executive director of the Georgia GOP. Where we go from here, we don't know. But again, when we find connections like this, we believe that they need to be reported, need to be known, and folks deserve to understand that these exist. So with that, Todd, I know we've gone over a little bit today, but we thought that those topics were important, and we anticipate that there's going to be probably more coming. So,
well, I was traveling today, and I listened again, I think for the fourth time, to the interview with Tucker and Catherine Austin Fitts. And every time I listen to it, I get more information and I glean more from it. And it just hit me that what is going on here, according to her, not me or Tucker, is that there is a group of people in the country who have essentially stolen upwards of 21 trillion and maybe more dollars from the U.S. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what's going on, and I'm not connecting this to anybody that we just talked about, this is just another subject. But if you look at what's going on with the stopping of the election, any investigation into the election fraud, any stopping ability of grassroots members to get into the different parties around the country to try to, get better governance, you have to see that. I mean, this is a big plot. I mean, to essentially loot the U.S. Treasury, and then stand up some other form of government. And it really made sense to me listening to her again today. You talk about the control grid, you talk about the depopulation efforts, you talk about the vaccine passports and all this stuff. It's really they realize the system is going to change in a bad way, and they are going to need to control us. So this is the fight. Now, Catherine did said she thought that it was a winnable fight and they would lose in the end. So, but it takes people at the local level to come in and stay very involved and fight at the local level on up. And that's what we're doing here in the great state of Georgia. So I just found that really interesting listening to that interview again. It just hit me, the overwhelming elegance of the plan of and it made everything make sense. You always wonder, why are they doing this Ukraine? Why do they need more money for Ukraine?
Mhm.
Well, it likely could be they're just stealing it for some other system they're building. I had never really thought of that before.
Why is there so much fraud being discovered in the USAID and other funding sources and flows
Yeah,
that it was not going, is not, hopefully has been stopped, but was not going where we were told it was going. It wasn't bags of rice and water going to folks in needy countries.
right.
It was often
Right.
going to NGOs that were doing nefarious things.
Exactly.
You're making hugely important points. We do, if folks have not seen that interview, we highly recommend that they go view it. It's available on Tucker's X account. And again, her name is Catherine Austin Fitz. Says some amazing things. But as he said, she believes that we will come out on the good side. We will solve this, but it is going to take people being unwilling to relinquish their positions and unwilling to give up. And how many times has Trump
That was her point.
himself said that?
Don't give up. That was her point. Don't give up. And her point also was that this is just it's so diabolical. But in the end, we will win if you don't give up, as you said. So
That's
that's
right.
it.
I would reflect that for the folks in Georgia. Many, it's one of the reasons I wanted to report so deeply on the GRA event yesterday, was because those people in that room largely are the kind of people that will not give up, and they are echoed by thousands, hopefully millions across Georgia and the rest of the country that will not. And
But,
so
she made one other point. She said the hardest thing I ever had to do was to look myself in the mirror and realize I was the patsy. I was the one that she was running housing and urban development, and her whole theory of the 2008 financial crash is that was just one big money grab, and mortgage fraud was the way to do that. But she said I had to realize that I was an unwilling participant in this big lie, and she said that's for some people that's harder than death. And to realize and to admit to yourself and to others that I was the patsy. I think there's probably a lot of people in our audience who are on the, who are Reagan Republicans that think that, we should support this no matter what. Well, guess what? Look yourself in the mirror. Maybe you just have to admit to yourself that what you've been told wasn't the truth, and you need to look again and fight for what is right. And I would encourage people to have an open mind if you're one of those people that think that, the GOP can't do any wrong. And by the way, we've reported a lot on Democrats too. It's not, we're talking truth here, and the uniparty we're dealing with. We're not talking about, Reagan or Reagan Republicans. We're talking about truth that we're trying to get to. And we see, unfortunately, right now, a lot of problems in the Georgia GOP. And that's all I have, Bill.
Me too, for the time being. We will be back Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. You will be on tomorrow morning at 10
That's
with
correct.
the Skiff, yeah?
Yeah, 10 to noon, Monday through Friday, Eastern. Very fascinating show. We style as an intelligence brief where you'll get what you need to know. You can listen to it on podcast. We try to curate what is out there. We have fantastic guests. We're going to have some fantastic guests on this week. One of them is going to be Tom Renz to talk about more of the internal issues inside the Trump administration with a refusal to look at some of the vaccine issues. So that should be a very good interview.
That's great. We will see you next time, and look forward to more to come.